and thanks for joining us for this week's Northwest Newsweek. I'm Riley McManus. Here in Thunder Bay, the district's medical officer of health is expressing some concerns about Ford's announcement yesterday. Dr. Janet DeMille says she hopes the planned relaxing of the restrictions doesn't give people a false sense of security. Kurt Black reports.
Just over 2 weeks after Ontario imposed restrictions for a host of indoor settings to quell the rise of the Omicron variant, the Ford government is easing those restrictions at the end of January. But is now the right time to reverse course? Medical Officer of Health Dr. Janet DeMille warns that loosening restrictions can lead to higher transmission if people aren't cautious. But she also sees the importance of some return to normalcy.
So it's really finding the right balance between having the measures in place, to protect people and places, while at the same time, still looking at how do we allow people and open up a little bit more so that people can do the things that are really meaningful to them.
This week has also seen the return to in-person learning for schools across the province, a decision that caused DeMille some concern initially. But so far, she has been impressed with the added measures schools have taken locally to protect both students and staff.
I know schools have put tremendous measures in place to keep them as safe as possible. And I am reassured that students are back in the classroom because that's really important for them to be there.
As for the latest decision from both the Lakehead and Catholic school boards to inform parents of any positive COVID cases in their children's schools that they are made aware of voluntarily, DeMille believes it is a reasonable measure to be taken at this time.
The way things are going is okay, and I do think though that schools, it's reasonable for them to take those measures if they choose to do so, to ensure that there's transparency in how they work with their parents and caregivers.
DeMille also wanted to encourage all those over the age of 18 to come forward and get their booster shot if they haven't already done so, adding that more walk-in vaccination clinics are coming soon. Kurt Black, TBT News.
Students across Ontario returned to in-class learning this week following a brief switch to online in the wake of the Omicron surge. The infectious variant has led to N95 masks being given to teachers and more HEPA filters installed in classrooms. And as Adam Riley reports, the two school boards along the North Shore are also having to strategize for potential staff shortages as a result of the virus.
The first day back went actually better than we thought it would, so we're very happy about that.
The last 2 weeks have given both the public and Catholic school boards in the North Shore region the time needed to prepare for in-class learning in the Omicron era of the COVID-19 pandemic. It didn't, however, help with staffing issues due to being sick or isolating as a result of an exposure, according to Superior North Catholic Director of Education Maria Vazzanelli, who is also praising staff for their efforts over the last 2 years.
They have been at the top of their game through this crisis. With Omicron, I'm not sure when the peak is. I'm hearing that it could be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. I think once we are over the peak, our staffing issues would stabilize.
Superior Greenstone's Nicole Morden-Cormier agrees with Vazzanelli, adding the school boards in the north were already short-staffed prior to COVID, and the virus and its insidious nature have further strained those staffing shortages. Thus, they have resorted to new strategies to mitigate the issue.
We have a process in place where we're able to collapse classes, bring them together in cohort situations. We have additional staff that we've brought into all of our schools where that staff has been available. And every evening and every morning, we're monitoring to see which of our staff are not able to attend work.
Fortunately, Morden-Cormier says they haven't had to resort to those measures so far, and both boards are benefiting from a smaller student body in their schools, making social distancing much easier to achieve. She adds there will be many challenges ahead, but with the right strategy, they will be able to get through this.
Will it be perfect? Absolutely not. Will we be able to bring our students into the school every single day? That may not happen, but we're going to avoid that at all costs.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
The federal government and the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation have signed a new deal that paves the way for the release of hundreds of thousands of historical documents. The paper details the histories of the government in church-run residential schools. CTV Annie Bourgeon-Oliver has the latest.
In the last 8 months, more than 1,200 unmarked graves have been confirmed at the sites of former residential schools. Now, the release of hundreds of thousands of documents by the federal government is bringing hope to communities looking to identify their children.
The records that will be handed over will be a way to get at the truth, to be able to tell our stories.
For years, Ottawa has been under pressure to gather and hand over historical records relating to the history and administration of residential schools. Today, documents including 11 school narratives with information on school enrollment and reports of abuse are starting to be transferred to the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation.
Families need this information. They want to know with certainty the relevant records have been released, and they have a right to that information. They have a right to know where their loved ones were taken.
Survivors and their advocates say the move is long overdue, but represents a crucial step towards reconciliation and healing.
It is a necessary part of addressing historical wrongs. We must understand the shameful parts of Canada's past in the spirit of reconciliation. Today marks an important moment in our quest to find all the records.
The National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation hopes to receive the records from the federal government within the next 6 months. They're also hoping the next federal budget includes additional funding to help scale up archival efforts. Annie Bourgeon-Oliver, CTV News, Ottawa.
The tragic fire that took the life of 3 Sandy Lake children last Friday morning has led to calls for improved fire suppression services in First Nation communities. The NDP's critic for Indigenous Relations, Saul Makama, says the higher levels of government need to address the lack of firefighting resources on the reserve before more lives are lost. The early morning fire in Sandy Lake claimed the lives of Grant, Remy, and Wilfred Meekus, aged 9, 6, and 4 years old. Mamakawa is calling on both the provincial and federal government for more resources, saying the jurisdictional ping pong has left First Nations without the infrastructure to protect their people.
There's no standard on how we're going to provide service on reserve with respect to fire suppression, fire safety. We're talking about no firehouse, like fire trucks, fire equipment. We're talking about volunteers, firefighters, first responders, and where's the training?
According to Ontario's Chief Coroner Office, First Nations children ages 0 to 9 years old have a fire-related mortality rate that is 86 times higher than non-First Nations children. OPP officers with the Armstrong Detachment used a little innovation to help with an emergency situation this past weekend. Police were called to assist EMS and Orange Air Ambulance with a patient on Sunday night, but the flight could not depart as there was a problem getting the runway lights to turn on. The officers had to think quickly and creatively as a patient was waiting inside the aircraft, so they came up with a plan to use flares from their cruisers to light up on the runway on both sides and allow the Orange flight crew to safely depart and take the patient to the hospital in Thunder Bay. When we come back, Terrace Bay gets a direction from residents on how to budget for 2022. A pre-budget survey conducted by the Township of Terrace Bay was the main topic at this week's council meeting. The results were presented to council to give members a lay of the land when it comes to how residents feel about services and the direction of the community as the 2022 budget takes shape. Adam Riley has more.
Only 116 surveys were completed, which makes up only 7.2% of Terrace Bay's population, but the message was clear. Residents want to see investment in the community. 71% of those respondents believed that tax rates for the town are fair and would like to see spending directed towards road maintenance and recreation facilities. According to Mayor Jody Davis, over the last 5 years, the town has spent $3.5 million on projects like repairs and upgrades to Mill Road or the expansion of storm sewers on Kenogami Road and Radisson Avenue to counter the effects of climate change. He adds when the town tackles a road project, they don't want to do just a cosmetic job.
We're not just going to repair roads. The infrastructure is 75 years old, just like the town. If we're going to repair the roads, or when we decide that we're going to replace the infrastructure too.
On the topic of investing in recreation facilities, Davis says they already have a big item being readied, upgrades to the arena and replacement of the ice plant facilities following the discovery of issues and the lack of replacement parts late last year. That facility, like many of the roads and underground infrastructure, is as old as Terrace Bay itself. Davis is hopeful the town will be able to get the ball rolling for that endeavor as early as next week.
By far the biggest ticket item for anything that since I've been on council 16 years, it's going to have to be replaced in the next few years. So we're going to go to Roma this year, and one of the meeting with ministers, and we'll start that process, making them aware of where we are with the arena and looking for their assistance and guidance on how to proceed on this.
Respondents also found themselves pleased with protective services like police, fire, and ambulance for the community, but are still looking for an update on the future of EMS, which is uncertain as Thunder Bay City Council has passed the controversial EMS master plan, but not yet begun to implement the regional aspects of it. Other concerns included tackling issues with the town's water treatment plant to address not just its infrastructure, but also the chlorinated taste and smell in the water and water conservation measures. Staff have now begun to build the 2022 budget, and Davis is optimistic that budget will be presented and passed by council in March. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Work is still happening behind the scenes on a proposed mining development in the Marathon area as the project works its way through the public input sessions. Generation Mining has its hopes set on an open pit of palladium mine located north of Marathon, which could bring almost 1,000 jobs to the area should the project get the go-ahead. Part of the process to determine if that will happen is the public input sessions, where residents and organizations can present their support or opposition to the project. This week, the Impact Agency of Canada held a virtual meeting to provide information to anyone planning to attend the input session, to lay out rules and provide advice to presenters. One of the questions came from Marathon Mayor Rick Dumas, who questioned the agency's decision to delay the proceedings by a month due to the appearance of the Omicron variant, instead of shifting to a virtual platform in the same timeline, which has been done before. But he says despite his frustrations of the delay, he believes the session was beneficial for those who will be presenting to the panel.
The participants in on the virtual session, an overview of what's going to take place. I also seen a lot of government officials on the site. So there was a lot of participation from different agencies within the provincial and federal governments. I also asked a question I didn't get an answer for, was in regards to the process. If it was wrapped up in 10 days, could we get the hearings be done with? Do we need to extend it for the 30 days just to wait for people to submit more requests? So that wasn't really answered, but that's okay. I'm okay. The process is what it is.
Public hearings on the proposed mine will begin on March 14th, and if it gets the go-ahead, could begin production late next year. By the beginning of the 2022 to 2023 school year, students in Atikokan will no longer have to deal with the hustle and bustle of learning on a construction site, as the $30 million project to turn Atikokan High School into a K-12 school is on schedule and on time. Adam Riley has the update on the project.
It's a beautiful building now. Just looking at the site and how it's going to look, you can see what the future will hold.
The wait is nearly over and work has stayed on budget and on time for the fall opening of a revamped kindergarten to grade 12 school in Atikokan. The $31 million project was greenlit by the province in 2018 and work began in 2020, When completed, the school will be home to close to 300 students. Rainy River District School Board Director of Education Heather Campbell says the school is truly coming together and will provide many opportunities for students.
They're going to have two really nice large gyms, and they'll have a beautiful music room that'll be on the stage. So they'll have dual purpose. We have a dual purpose shop class. So there's just lots of flexibility to adapt as we go forward and how education changes.
Campbell notes having several sections of the school being new allows for modern amenities like stronger Wi-Fi coverage and better ventilation to be incorporated into the design instead of being retrofitted after the fact. While things are running smooth from a time and budget standpoint, she says that's not to say there haven't been some challenges, primarily as a result of the pandemic. Some supply chain issues have cropped up, but fortunately the contractor Finway has managed to keep those issues to a minimum on the project, which Campbell saw up close during a tour prior to the holiday break.
All aspects of the site were well underway, whether it's the childcare and the family children hub, whether it's the elementary or the secondary programming. The classrooms were up. They were waiting for some door frames. They were waiting for just some of the materials.
Some older sections of the school will be demolished and replaced with a playground for the elementary school age students, which a board representative says will happen as soon as possible, but no later than the beginning of the 2023-2024 school year. Also, with the implementation of the K-12 model, it effectively creates a new school, and that new school will not be a high school. Campbell says now there is a consideration for a name change.
We have a process, and we'll be embarking upon that this spring, that we look at the renaming or naming of a new school. And certainly when you see a consolidation of a couple of schools or more, you need to go through that process.
Campbell says once all the students have relocated to the new school, the board will declare the existing elementary school, North Star Community School, as surplus and will be disposed of accordingly. Adam Riley, TBT News.
A 39-year-old resident of Rainy River District has been arrested following a joint investigation by the OPP and Treaty 3 police into an alleged possession of child pornography. As part of the investigation, an electronic device was found to contain several files of child sexual abuse material. On January 19th, Brian Brewer was charged with the possession of child pornography. He appeared in court that day to answer to the charge. However, a media release from the OPP did not indicate if he would remain in custody or released back into the community. Coming up after the break, Dryden's Chris Pronger gets sent to the rafters. Monday was a very special night in St. Louis, Missouri for arguably the best hockey player to ever come out of Northwestern Ontario, as Dryden's Chris Pronger had his number 44 raised to the rafters of the Enterprise Centre, becoming just the 8th player in franchise history to be bestowed the honor. In 9 seasons with the Blues, the Hockey Hall of Famer played 598 games, tallying 356 points and 931 penalty minutes. Pronger led the team to its best regular season in franchise history in 1999 to 2000, winning the Hart Trophy as league MVP, becoming just the 2nd player in NHL history to win the Norris Trophy as top D-man and league MVP in the same season. The other was named Bobby Orr. The 47-year-old was definitely feeling the festivities on a special night and says he has to thank St. Louis for the man he is today.
When you play in a city for 10 years and move back to a city, I've been here now 10 more years, and think about my hometown of Dryden. I lived there 15, so this is my new adopted home, being here now 20 years. You always motivated me to play harder, pushed me to be my best, and held me to a standard that I relished and tried to match. So cheers to you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me.
Local MP Marcus Pawlowski says he would be in favor of taxing the unvaccinated as a measure to encourage people to get the jab. His thoughts followed last week's announcement out of Quebec, where the Premier suggested the province would implement an anti-vax tax as COVID cases continue to surge.
We're looking for an health contribution for adults who refuse to be vaccinated for non-medical reasons.
Quebec's tax would be applied to adults who reject getting their first shot and are without a medical exemption. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has not said whether he'd consider implementing the measure nationwide. Pawlowski says while the idea is controversial, it's a necessary incentive to provide relief to hospitals and influence the unvaccinated to get the shot.
Tobacco, alcohol, a lot of countries, a lot of states tax pop. All for the same kind of reason, is that generally speaking, you're better off if you don't do as much of those things. Not that we want to prohibit it, but we like to influence your behavior somewhat.
The amount of the vax tax has yet to be determined in Quebec. If Trudeau decides to implement the measure federally, Pawlowski believes a monthly fee of $100 would be a fair penalty. As Bearskin Lake First Nations continues to recover from their recent COVID crisis, the Anglican Church of Canada is stepping up to assist the community in a time of need. The church's World Relief and Development Fund has purchased $10,000 worth of food from the Westfort Foods to donate to Bearskin Lake after their unprecedented COVID outbreak. The boxes were loaded onto a large truck Thursday and will be transported to Bearskin along the ice roads. St. Paul's Anglican Church Archdeacon Deborah Kraft says she was relieved with how quickly the Anglican Church of Canada responded to her request to help the community.
Well, I am just so very happy that this church relief agency has moved so very quickly to get this approved, because it's not something that can wait for several weeks or a month. And I'm just very, very thankful again for all their support.
I just want to thank the Anglican Church and Mr. and Mrs. Kraft for the contribution that is being made to the community and people of Bearskin Lake, and on behalf of the Chief and Council and the people of Bearskin Lake, thank you very much.
The big truck also contains $5,000 worth of building supplies donated by the Thunder Bay Home Depot store to Bearskin Lake. And that wraps up Northwest Newsweek. We hope to see you again next time.